productive debate and consensus, and then action. We never get to action if we don't get to the consensus.
Nicely put, Kelly. I think I'm always struck by when she's given the example about the researcher who came in, and it was in his, how did she phrase it? In his inability to prove her wrong, that was the way she felt most, that she knew that her data was right, because she had all the confirmations and someone was seeking disconfirmations and did not successfully disconfirm it. So she actually got stronger, truer validation of the information from that interaction. And I guess that's what we're trying to think about. And Kelly, you sort of express it in a different way, is that I like the wheat from the chaff analogy, because we can, as Heffernan refers to it, as thinking people, we can listen with the point of further understanding, rather than just saying, I'm going to hear what you have to say, and then I'm going to tell you again why my point is correct and why yours is not. But if you're listening, and she said, remember, she said, this is how you learn. These are learned skills, practiced habits, talents that you develop, that there is a way that we actually are getting the truer, more foundational information from which to make the decisions, from which to act, like you say, actions. When we realize that the what might seem veering off the pathway points of view is really serving the purpose of helping us clarify. So that's really why I like to do it, because in school boards, we are all about the info, and we want our constituents who put us in the chair, we want our colleagues, we want the staff, the teachers, and everyone, and we certainly want the community to be impressed by our command of the data. But that in and of itself is a goal, is taking your focus off that North Star goal, is how's that serving kids? How do we better serve kids if I just get to prove my point? So that's really what it's about. I guess it's a little about clarifying and giving ourselves permission. Like I think she titles it Dare to Disagree. But for me, it was a real eye-opener about that it does sometimes take courage to realize that info gathering it comes in many forms, and when it results in clarifying and strengthening and truing up the foundation of our decision making, it's very, very much worth it. And the reason we segue into the working styles kind of report on our homework is because this is where we find out where we can use our working styles, not as a woe is me, oh no, I working style this won't interact successfully with working style that. It's not the case. We always do. And as Scott, as we were saying earlier in the break, I think if you take this little mini questionnaire of the 5 questions and you ask yourself those questions again 2 weeks from now or a month from now or whatever, it might not track exactly, because we are people who change depending on what's the situation. But in terms of where we are on this day, on this date in May in the year of 2021, or a couple days before, whenever you did it, I want to take a little tally. I'll get old school with paper and pencil and ask you to share with me what the working style questionnaire yielded for you. So you knew how to do it. Your lowest number, when you added them all up, tells you which of these categories, and as I say, realize some people find themselves oftentimes tied with more than one category. But the lowest number, ostensibly, just for the purposes of today's discussion, is going to identify a working style that you find yourself in. Steve, would you be able to share what did the working style scoring grid say that you fell into which category?
It said that I was mostly analytical, and then I would tend to agree with that.
What was the second number? What was the second lowest number for you?
The second lowest was amiable, but that was a significantly higher score than the
A
analytical.
significant, big difference between analytic and amiable. Very interesting. Del Rey, would you share what did the grid tell you?
Analytical, then driver.
Analytical and driver. Okay, Lee, how about you? What did the grid yield for you?
So it was a tie between analytical and driver.
Lots of ties come up in this, I've noticed. Okay. And was there a third one that was sort of a second place, second lowest number, Lee?
Amiable.
Amiable, okay. And Nancy, what did the grid show for you?
Find that.
What's that?
Incomplete. I didn't do my homework. You can do it real quickly while Scott and I do ours.
Yeah, it takes no time just to answer the questions real quick. Okay, Kelly, what did the grid seem to think about you today?
So in atypical, I'm almost even all across the board. On all
Interesting.
four. So, but it was a clear 11 for driver, 12 for amiable. So, which
Those were-
surprised me. When we were talking about it earlier, I thought it was the opposite, and I thought analytical was my top, but it's not. It's my lowest. So,
It's
which
interesting.
was just that whole leap and then look kind of an attitude that I have. You know, just let's just get started. We can
Yeah,
tweak it as we go, kind of an attitude. Yeah.
interesting. Okay, how about you, Scott?
So the clear winner was driver for me.
Yeah.
And then analytical was my next, but it was funny. They were all grouped. Analytical, expressive, and amiable were all within one number.
Really close, really
Yeah,
sort of.
very close. So
sort of
driver was
spread.
furthest, and then the other three were right there.
All right. Well, listen. Well, let's just take a look at the when we look at what each style brings to the table. There's a little grid there with just the kind of the phrases and the bullet points there. It's telling you that thoroughness, you guys, that where analytical came up, thoroughness was something that was a constituent of your sort of working style. Putting on the brakes instead when the driver wants to jump and put on the gas. It's helpful because that's if you put on the brakes and you're about to run into a tree, that's a good thing. You know, kept you from running into the tree. You're avoiding a mistake. And you like data. And a lot of us like the data because it can help you be thorough. Interesting. But then there's drivers. So Scott, you said you were a driver, that you're a man of action. And I think that's probably pretty big in your job description, a lot of action there. But you see the components of that style about being focused, getting the job done, being organized, timelines, and discipline. All of that sounds to me like the categories when you do your superintendent. If you're at, no matter what instrument for evaluation you're using, there are several out there. Some are scoring grids, some are narrative or whatever. But if you come away from your superintendent evaluation, and as Scott identified himself as a driver, and you say, wow, our superintendent is really focused on getting the job done, and he's very strict about obeying timelines. When we want something by X date, he delivers it. He's very disciplined. That's a pretty good working style for an effective superintendent. So that's not too much of a surprise there.
You passed, Scott. I just
Got
don't
lucky.
see that as being.
Got lucky. Got lucky.
Timelines and such. Okay.
What about you, Nancy? Have you come up with any? Are you still scribbling away there? I don't know.
Almost. She's almost.
All right. Okay, while we're doing that, we'll go ahead and we'll talk about the amiables because several of you, this oftentimes happens. We are not monoliths as individuals, nor are we monolithic as a group. So we're going to have the components of other working styles in our dominant working style. And several of you mentioned about amiables. And, if that style means that you're sensitive, you want to really pay attention, maybe like Kelly, you're saying, sifting that wheat from the chaff. You want to be inclusive, not just for the warm fuzzy sake, but because it helps you truly, truly understand and build consensus. As you said, that's a terrific constituent part of being an amiable. And the inquiry skills, like the joke I mentioned earlier about the old movie mogul who would say, for your benefit, let me ask you a question. Sometimes questioning, when we teach our communications models in the Masters in Governance program, one of the things we we build right in is when you're responding to people, oftentimes you need to ask a question in the course of it. They come and I'm the parent and I'm upset about this issue. You may need to ask immediately, have you talked to the principal? What have you learned so far? So oftentimes inquiry and notice it says inquiry skills, inquiring for the purpose of getting relevant information is a big part of being an amiable. And then lastly, the expressives. I haven't heard anybody mention the expressives yet, but these are our vision people. They are the creator. What did you say that in the other study, Kelly calls it ideation or ideators?
Yeah, strengths finders, ideators.
Yeah, strength finders, yeah.
They're ideators.
Very simple, but these expressives, very high in creativity, love humor, which is another way of saying they want to connect. There's a connectedness when we share a smile or a laugh. So humor becomes a big thing. And they give themselves to go big picture, to go think out of the box. They're going to say, I see that you've given me a hammer and nails and you want me to build this box with 4 sides, but I see it as a triangle. So let's try the triangle in this. So our expressives serve a real purpose. And of course, none of the working styles work, no pun intended, in isolation, because the reason we're doing this little tally is to just kind of take a little bit of a look at how different working styles interface, interact, work together, because they must. We can't just all be analyticals, and we'll see why in a minute. So Nancy, anything you want to share? Did the grid yield anything about you?
This is very interesting. I'm an analytical driver that's expressive.
There you go.
It's 14 three ways.
No, actually, it's the other way around. Number 1 is amiable.
Yeah. Oh,
The lowest number. So we did the same thing.
It's your lowest score.
Okay.
Amiable.
So you're amiable,
You like
amiable driver.
No, we all did.
Yeah, I know it's if the instructions about going for the lowest score, sometimes that's a little point that's overlooked. So yours were amiable driver and analytical, sort of in the going from lowest to
Others
lowest.
were all 14.
She had an 8 and 3 14s. So
Wow. Okay.
very amiable.
Across the board. Yeah, that's a very amiable. All right. Well, flip over then and let's look at the chart about how we make the most of those working styles. So you are based on today's, and as I said, this could change. You could take this give yourself this test tomorrow and it could be completely different. But as we look at it now, look at how it says, if you've got a couple of analyticals talking together, they are saying, oh no, look for your nearest driver. That's a tricky combination. Priority of task. You see how where 2 analyticals might have a bit of a butt heads type dynamic, bring in the driver aspect of it, and suddenly you get some time frames, you get some discipline, and you can actually get things done. So it's not too scary. As you move across, that's analytical and driver. You go to across on the page under column C, amiable. You got to be careful that you don't spend, it says cut short your social hour and get down to specifics. Analyticals, that's where you can help your amiables, after you check on, oh, how's the weather? Oh, I did, glad that the team won the game last Friday night. Oh boy, blah, blah. But then get down to business. And then lastly, when you analyticals are talking to an expressive, it's suggesting that you take that vision after you laud it and compliment it, then craft some goals in it. Bring your analytical skills to help the amiable put in a plan of action. So that's it. Let's go down to the next one, to B, if we go driver. Drivers and analyticals we talked about before. They can organize, they can get things done. But if you go to drivers and drivers, it says get a car with a good set of brakes. Again, there's that of butting heads. They've got a little bit of tongue-in-cheek humor about driving off the cliff. They tell us that drivers and amiables need to put on that thick skin, which we mostly do when we are school board members anyway. Thick skin is a prerequisite. But the drivers are going to say, we're trying to get there. We want to get things done. Whereas the amiable may be saying, well, remember the amiable said, well, I want to be inclusive. Have we facilitated a channel of communication from every single voice? Have we got many voices here? So you drivers, be aware that your amiables may be wanting you to be more inclusive for the purpose of strengthening your decision making. That's the reason. And then the last one, drivers and expressives, help take that vision, really look at it. How does a vision, which is way up at the 30,000 foot level, really translate down to where we can get things done with real objectives, real measurements, real data measurements. All right, amiables. Let's go across real quickly on amiables. Amiables and analyticals can start with an amiable conversation, but move to the specifics of a project. Amiables and drivers. I'll give you a chance. Obviously, you take this home and read it in more detail as you wish, but it challenges us to drivers be sure to be specific about deadlines, because the amiables may be so accommodating. They may say, oh, whenever you can get that information, that's okay. When really a timeline and a deadline would be helpful. So don't be shy about that. Amiables together, oh, warm and fuzzy. Might be a good for a coffee clutch at Starbucks, but do need to really work together if you've got an amiable and an amiable to set those concrete directions. Amiables and expressives, they can also go off on a wouldn't it be nice if tangent, but if they remind themselves to bring structure, bring timelines, bring plans and objectives, bring data to the table, then you can still have an effective working relationship. Finally, expressives. Expressives and analyticals. Expressives can oftentimes bring layers of compelling, attention-grabbing, motivating information to an analytical. An analytical say, well, I've got the data, it's right here, blah, blah, blah. But then here comes your expressives and say, now, how do we couch this good data in a way that it will be compelling and will elicit the response that we need? It's like school districts very often, when you're going for, say, a bond measure, you have to go with the fact and the feeling. You've got to give them the fact that you need that money to modernize campuses that are 50 years old. But if you have some feeling and your expressive says, well, let's tell them about Mrs. Jones' room, where when she goes to, hammer a poster into the wall, the nail goes right through. Bring some fact, bring some feeling. Let the expressives have their moment, along with the analytical and with the driver. Drivers are akin to analyticals in that way. Then amiables and expressives, they can dance well pretty good, because they are both praising and reveling in the ability to be creative, to express things in a creative way. But my favorite tongue-in-cheek humor is the bottom right square of the whole grid. It says, this is what you do when you have two expressives working together. It assumes that you've already talked about it, you solved world hunger, or fill in the world crisis of you've already found, you've eradicated COVID. Now, how are you going to do it? So, but think about that. As we said, this working style questionnaire, every now and then trot it back out. Give yourself the test again, see where you came out. See if you came out the same way you did on May 29th. But I also want to just make very clear to you that what you just saw as we talked our way through the grid combination, this one and this one and that one, et cetera, there's no combination that cannot be effective. Especially when you have what we spend our morning talking about, is that shared unity of purpose, those goals about serving each and every kid, about that. So fret not if you think, oh, my working style, I'll never be able to work as effectively as I wish. It is not a roadblock when you go back to that shared vision and unity of purpose about working for kids. Kelly, is that a hand up, or you just?
It is. Could we just repeat our number ones? Actually, I think I have myself, Scott, our drivers, Nancy's amiable, and then what were the other ones? I'm sorry. Lee, you were split between analytical and driver?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then Steve, what was yours?
Analytical.
And Nancy was amiable. Okay. Oh, right. That's one that's analytical.
So remember back in Dr. Heffernan's video in her TED Talk, that she said that for the researcher that she talked about, it was the other guy's inability to prove her wrong that made her most secure and confident that she had found right information. So that's why we needn't fear when we're working with other working styles, because it can be just as valuable and just as validating.
I'm sorry, I always have something to say. It reminded me when we were listening to the video that this is now standard practice with all studies, is that they have peer review. And I don't believe it was standard practice prior to Dr. Stewart that she was referring to in the video. The peer review
Interesting.
process, yeah, all studies undergo peer review. Well, they should.
Yeah. Oh, it's just pro forma. We can hardly imagine that there was a time when it wasn't. You know, like she said about, it seemed shocking when she said they were still, for 25 years, they were still doing x-rays on pregnant women. You know, when you watch an old movie now and you see a pregnant woman smoking or, you know, going into a bar or something, it's like, what's going on there? Okay, working styles analyzed. We have spent just about as much time as I wanted to spend on that, because now for the rest of our time, this is, I believe, and I very much trust will be foundational to a continuing step that this board, this governance team, this district will embark upon, of saying, we've got all kinds of policies, capital P, BP board policy. We've got all kinds of lowercase p policies, plans and documents that dictate how we run our district. We've got bargaining agreements with our teachers union and our classified union. We've got parent handbooks. We've got school site survey reports. We've got site plans. We've got this and that. You have all kinds of info, but how can you take what we've talked about today about the unity of purpose, role of the board versus the role of the board member, role of the board versus the role of the staff and the administration? How do you take that and make that into yet another document, which has become quite useful across the disciplines, is the governance handbook. So a lot of governance handbooks flow from protocols, which is how we'll end up our discussion. But first, we're going to talk about a little bit about the norms, about how we actually treat each other and the norms that we agree on, and then develop into protocols. And Carol the Magnificent is taking notes, and I have no doubt that there will be a synthesized beginning of a possible future governance handbook that will come out of this good discussion that we're going to have. But let's go back to the workbook and let's look at, and by the way, as you can tell, the workbook is a treasure trove of information, but it's also many, many pages. And it is not, you know, as I say, you're the advanced class. I'm not going to read you the page by page, because you can do that. But I am feeling the obligation and the privilege of calling some things to your attention. And the one I want to look at is page 41, about every organization has, oh, bless you, God bless you. Every organization has a culture. In my work, my professional work in the public relations business for many, many years, when we would be pitching a prospective new client, we'd be giving them, you know, our ideas about how to sell their soap or their widgets or whatever. But we would always try to kind of close the deal by saying, you know, you have public relations, whether you want it or not. The key is, do you want to manage it? And they go like, oh, okay, I get it. But so what I'm saying is, you have a culture, you have a culture, but the question is, are you doing everything you can to make it a positive culture? And that's where norms come into play. So let's just start again. Kelly, maybe if you wouldn't just, since we're after lunch, we need to stay active, as you said, so we don't get a little, can you read that first paragraph for us about culture is the positive or negative atmosphere, et cetera?
41.
Sorry, I never heard her say that.
Yeah, page 41, sorry. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, first paragraph under norms?
Yes,
Norms? Yeah,
yes, please.
at the bottom, right? Under what are norms?
No, under the top of the page says
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
every organization has a
program.
culture. There you go.
Okay, culture is the positive or negative atmosphere created by the way people in an organization treat each other. This means how a board governs is every bit as important as the decisions a board makes. In fact, the way a board governs affects its ability to come to consensus about the direction for the district, its effectiveness in establishing a positive climate that achieves the best from its staff, and its credibility as an advocate for the district and for children.
Comments? How a board governs is every bit as important as the decision the board makes. And that's why when, Lee, I'm glad when we first started talking this morning that we had an opportunity to clarify that our work today is the how do we govern. We're getting to this, the nitty gritty of the norms of how we work together so that we can govern. This is not about the decisions that you make in the act of governing. It's about practicing how to govern, in fact. So that's what we're doing. The second paragraph there, Steve, would you read that second one about the governance team needs to create a framework, et cetera?
Governance team needs to create a framework within which they can work respectfully and competently with each other and with district staff, parents, students, and the community. Team does this by developing, agreeing on, and committing to norms.
And that's you. That's the team. So when you establish your norms, and many districts have them and put them in their board packets every time you have a meeting, that it can be something as simple as listen with the intent of understanding, things like that. An agreed on set of norms does this. I love this quote that says, this may be from one of the Covey books. I'll look and see. Trust is the result of respect and understanding, not agreement. Trust is the result of respect and understanding, not agreement. Agreement in and of itself, just like we said, striving. We don't want boards to break their arms trying to pat themselves on the back saying, we're always 5-0, we're 5-0, we must be a high functioning board. The trust comes not from the agreement, but from the respect and the understanding that you gain during the consensus building process. And that's why having the team, which is you, has this obligation to develop mutually agreed on norms and then living them through. That it's very self-explanatory on the next page, if you can turn or scroll, where it talks about why norms are important. The part here that we won't read these at all, but that's the second sentence on the first paragraph that begins, the integrity of the district's educational program is dependent upon the responsible and professional manner in which each board member and the board collectively fulfill their governance roles and responsibilities. Well, we spend a heck of a lot of time talking about your governance roles and responsibilities, but as you back it up, it says, ladies and gentlemen, the district's educational program is dependent upon your work there. Remember that? I'm sorry, Nancy, it's page 42 at the top. The district's educational program is dependent on how you are collectively fulfilling those roles and responsibilities. It's not a test. It's not a test where I wake you up in the middle of the night or text you and say, tell me the 4 areas of responsibility. Okay, I set the direction. We establish the structure. It's because you have children, you have students whose needs deserve to be met. And that's where your responsibility of the framework of agreed upon norms comes into play with that North Star question again. How does this serve kids? It's because the actual work that you do is going to inure back to the district's educational program, which is the reason, as I say, that you gave up your Saturday to be sitting here today talking about this. So, and then the last paragraph there that I look at, or the second one about it says, when board members and superintendents work well together, climate of trust, confidence, excellence is created, which enables staff members to feel supported and positive, et cetera. I won't read the rest of it. I mentioned that first part of the sentence because it doesn't just say, when you're working well together, you have trust and confidence. It aspirationally says trust, confidence, and excellence. We are not looking for mediocre educational programs. We are looking for the best we can actually do for each and every kid. So norms play a role there. That's another reason that norms are important, because it literally allows you to legitimately strive for excellence, not just okay. All right, so moving on down, the last thing I want to call your attention to on this page is the paragraph that starts with group expectations. And I do feel like we should do this one all together. Scott, would you read this paragraph that begins group expectations?
Sure. Group expectations help a group work together to not only address difficult issues in an objective and consistent way, but also to confirm what each member will do in the normal course of business to help the team succeed. The team gains in two ways. One way is that the exercise serves to confirm desired behaviors. The second way is that clear group norms provide guidance for orientating future new members to the team.
And that is the context why your district and a whole bunch of sister districts across the state of California are having discussions just like this. Because the team, the pair relationships in a 6-member governance team, 5-member board is, I've forgotten the number, but I think it's in the 70s. If you just do how many pair relationships, you've got A to B, A to C, A to D, A to E, et cetera. You get it. So every time a new composition of the board comes into being, how do you say, well, how are we going to, figure out how to do? If you have agreed upon norms, when you onboard a new board member, it is good for the new board member and good for the process. So I encourage those of you, Scott, I know you and I talked about the onboarding process was very key to you when you had both your appointees, when you brought your new board members on. So give yourselves a proverbial pat on the back about that one. So I'm going to ask you at your leisure to feel free to read through the subsequent pages. If you look pages 44 and 40, I guess it's 45, 44 and 45, it's a cookbook. It's the recipe for developing norms. And as so many good guiding documents, which this workbook is meant to be, it helps you out by posing some of the key questions there you see on page 44 about what do you think are the qualities. And these are discussions that you can ponder on individually as you move forward, as you move from developing your norms into developing the protocols that will be foundational to your governance handbook. So I have talked about protocols. Now I want us really to, and if you can, we're going to do a little exercise now. If everybody will scroll or flip to page, let's see, page 51. Let's see where it is.
Protocols.
Keep us on track. Yeah, does it say top 30 protocols or? Let's see. Yes. Top 30 protocols to consider. That is a fairly comprehensive list. Many school districts will have protocols grouped into categories because you can see some of these go together. But we're going to take just a little time to work individually with these protocols. And I'm going to ask you, just from your point of view, your own analytical or driver point of view, whatever, read through. It'll take some time. Have good old paper and pen handy. But I'd like you to identify 6 protocols you see on this list that you find to be of top priority. It'll take some time. I'll go quiet so you can work for a good 6 or 7 minutes. What may I clarify you about the instructions? Read all 30, identify about 6 that you feel are top priority. And as I said, I'll go quiet now for the next 6 minutes.
Only 6?
Yeah.
It's called.
That's a very good point. If you feel compelled, go over 6. Let's call it at least 6.
I'm gonna go stand in the center, please. Okay. Be right back.
Yeah. We can turn the cooler off now.
Thank you, Scott.
I had my sweater out to bring it, left it.
That was great. It's gonna be super hot.
Another 5 minutes, I would
That
go
just
grab
made
your
it
coat.
worse. You know what? I'm gonna go see if I have a sweater in the car, because now I'm really cold after standing out there.
Oh, is this my new plate?
So cheers.
She said at least 6.
That's true. I might have said.
Was it enough?
My emergency jacket.
Don't be afraid to go over 6 if you feel like it. Another couple minutes.
30 priorities.
Okay,
I
In
just
a-
threw the page out.
we'll come back together in another couple minutes.
Yeah, I got 3 too.
There we go.
And add
Oh,
one.
yeah,
I just talked through it.
man.
Is it amicable?
Amicable, amiable.
I can't say it, but I are one.
See the people. She is there.
No.
What are we doing? Are we taking a break or should I instigate something here?
No, we're the top 30 protocols consider. We're choosing
But we already finished, right? So it looks like we're all done.
They cheated. They took them
We're
all.
gonna come back together in about a minute, and
Okay.
then we're gonna be taking some real time to share out. So.
That's right. Put the jacket on and immediately.
So we'll wait just a second till
Freezing to death.
Delray comes back. Kelly, you're confusing me. You put on a wrap, you took off a wrap. What's going on with the temperature there?
58?
Say no more.
Yeah.
Say no more. Well,
If you kill it.
if they say 60 is the new 40, so that 60 is the new 40, that makes you about 25.
That's right. I like that. I'll go with that. I feel better than I did at 25. Of course,
I think I weighed about 80 pounds when I was 25. It was not a pretty picture, so.
Did you see that Will Smith has decided that he's decided now he wants to get in the best shape of his life, which I think he probably was when he was doing
Lord
action
have
movies.
mercy.
Yeah,
He's
really.
in the best shape of anybody in the world, okay? Come on. How much better shape can he get in?
And then by the same token, there's, you know, the unbelievably inspirational Tiger Woods, where we're just thinking, my gosh, this guy's lucky to be alive. And he's working, almost able to walk on his own. So, you know, motivation is there. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. So many of you got the gist right away that just identifying 6 is really hard, because this is a good list. And there is some overlap in some of them, but we are going to share now with the always excellent Carol taking notes. We're going to share what you identified. Was there anybody who identified only 6? Okay, Kelly, we'll start with you. And remember how in the Heffernan TED Talk, she said that for, where was it? Was it Oxford? The PhD students or something were being asked to write 5 statements they could defend. So I'd like you to identify the number from the list of the protocol that you've said, hey, this is a priority, this is good for us. And then if you have anything you'd like to say to illuminate or expand on why you picked it, that would be great. What I'm not asking you to do, folks, is to prioritize your 6. Like this, if one, you know, if you feel passionately that a particular one is the number 11111, then say so. But at this point, we're just gathering the multitude of protocol items that emerged from your review of them. So Kelly, you're going to, now you have the ability to model the behavior for the rest of the group,
Okay,
to
but I have to be honest.
identify it and then speak to it. Speak to why you identified it.
Okay, I have to be honest though, I combined 21 and 22 into
That's,
one.
there's going to be a lot of that.
Okay, so I have 6 and a half. All right, so, and I only picked 6 because that's what we were told to do, and I'm,
You follow rules.
I follow. I'm
You're
not
a rule follower. Okay.
No,
I'm
she's
not.
not.
I am not at all. But anyway, okay. Number 3, communication among the governance team members. Obviously, if we're not communicating, we're not doing our job. We're incapable of doing
Ineffective.
anything else that we're responsible for doing if we cannot communicate. And then number 17, addressing conflict among board members. Kind of the same thing, but just having some protocols or rules around how we're going to manage that so that conflict is good and allowed, but not, it doesn't break down into insult throwing or, you know, I'm not that it hasn't been that way, but you know what I mean? That I'm thinking of classes I've taken in the past, but you know, that conflict is healthy and productive rather than destructive.
Yeah, Heffernan
then-
actually said conflict was a type of thinking. You know?
Yes. And then 21 and 22, handling concerns and complaints from the community and from the staff. I think that staff is part of the community. They are an integral part of the educational community. So I think handling complaints, there needs to be a set protocol of how we address those. And I think at this point we've been kind of winging it, and I don't know if that's right, because what I might respond to a complaint is different than what Steve might respond to a complaint. And then we're sending mixed messages, or we're just not sending the right message, or we're sending a message when we shouldn't be sending any message other than that we've heard you. So I think just making sure we clarify that. And then speaking with a common voice. One of the things that they said in MIG was unity, not uniform. So we're not uniform in our decisions or our opinions or perspectives, but we come together with a unity of voice. It's like that whole, you know, once you make the decision, everybody stands behind it. Even if a year down the road, you're going to advocate to change it, or 2 months down the road, whatever the case, we made this decision today. We are one voice in supporting that decision because that's the decision that was made. Very difficult if you're on the negative side of something that gets approved or the positive side of something that gets disapproved. But it's definitely something that will give a certain culture or a certain, what's the word, persona. It'll reflect positively upon us if we can speak with a common voice. And then 27, managing difficult topics and issues in an atmosphere of mutual respect. I think there's kind of a theme here. Whoops, I kind of picked the same one over and over basically, but just understanding, what the respect is. Like, I tend to talk too much, no surprise to anybody. So learning how to step back or step up if you're not a speaker, not someone that speaks out, and that is something I'm challenged with often, because if it pops into my head, it usually falls out my mouth. So yeah, that's true. It pops
That's
in my
not
head.
negative.
Out. Okay, and then number 30, self-monitoring, because I find it very difficult to have a perspective on myself without somebody else help to sound things off of or to help. And I don't think that's unusual or unique to me. I think that a lot of people don't really have a good sense of how they are perceived necessarily, or whether they're being effective in what they're trying to do. And so we have to do the work to analyze, were we effective with this decision? Did it achieve what we wanted to achieve? And without, researching it and studying it, there's no way to know. Right? You have to purposely look for what was the result of that. Did it work?
Yeah, intentionally. I like that you're going back to the refrain that the trust and respect building comes from not from uniformity or from agreement. It comes from the process of consensus building. So very nice for that. So, all right. Well, Kelly, I drew the short straw and went first in this round robin share round, but to be randomly fair, we'll do it now by birth date. Does anybody have a January birth date? Any of the remaining 5 of you? Anybody have a February birth date? Steve, what did you find just jumping off the page of these protocols?
All right, going in the numerical order that they're listed here. Number 11, board member reports at board meetings. Right now, it's pretty much just, free expression, whatever's on your mind. And I think that, we could build some structure, some general guidelines for that. And I think there's some room for improvement there. Number 13, deliberation and decision-making at board meetings. Sometimes, especially if it's a hot topic, things can get rather chaotic, and they've occasionally gotten a little bit heated. And I think we could stand to improve that process. Number 17, addressing conflict among board members. Similar to what Kelly was saying, conflict can be good as long as it doesn't get in the way of what we're there for, and sometimes it does. So finding a way to handle the conflict productively, I think, would be a good thing. Number 18, allowing majority vote to set the direction. Similar to what Kelly was saying about speaking with one voice, we're working together as a we. We vote as an I, but then the decision is a we. And I think that's a good area for us. Number 19, meeting guidelines for board and other district meetings. As we've said, we sometimes kind of take things a little casually, get a little sidetracked, and I think getting back to the structure would be good. Number 20, public comment section of board meetings. This was actually my number one because ultimately we are there to serve the public, whether it's staff members, students, parents, just community members. Making sure that we listen to their input, I think, is absolutely critical. And as we discussed earlier, we need to do a better job of receiving and not reacting. My next one, number 25, speaking with a common voice. Again, you know, once the voting of the aye is done, we need to be a we and move forward on common ground. And then number 27, managing difficult topics, issues in an atmosphere of mutual respect. We're not all going to agree on things, but there's no reason we can't all treat each other with dignity and respect. And, you know, ultimately we're all here because we want to do what's best for our students. So we need to remember that and, you know, remember to be role models for the students as well.
Thanks, Steve. You know, maybe you've heard some horror stories. I have about when some board members' behavior is not anything you would want your students to emulate when you have possibly students in the room, in the gallery. And if that doesn't open your eyes and make you think, wow, what is that fourth grader or that 11th grader? Look what they're watching. This is what the behavior they're observing. There's a great James Baldwin quote about kids may not always listen to their elders, but they will never fail to imitate them. So that's really quite something. Okay.
As I mentioned earlier, I was actually at a board meeting with my son, and there were a whole bunch of other seniors in the room when I saw a board member make a very derogatory comment about another board member. The board member that made the comment's no longer on this board, but it was very disappointing to see that.
You know, we've talked about the strange pluses and minuses of our meeting virtually so much over the past year, and there have been some on both sides, but indeed in my geographic area, in an approximate sort of Central Valley school district, they now have a new board because prior to a meeting, when they had already gone live,
Yeah.
have you heard this story?
Yes,
And
they just want their baby.
disparaged parents and community members. Yeah, they are no longer sitting on that board. Yeah.
How embarrassing.
Put me in it wrong.
That's right. Be careful what you say. Okay, Steve, thank you. And thank you for, as I say, when we finish our round robin, we're going to talk about how you develop a protocol, the steps for developing a protocol. So this is why it's good for us to get an idea of some for instances of, like I said, hey, so many of you mentioned this one. Here's steps for developing a protocol, how that might look. All right, so Steve was a February birthday. Anybody have a March birthday or April or May? Or is that Nancy? Are you April, baby?
April.
What you got, Miss Anderson?
Well, at first I wrote them down with the idea that we were looking at a new board member coming on and what the most important 7 things would be for that.
Interesting perspective. Very interesting perspective. I like it.
Okay, so you want me to go over those?
Sure.
Okay, number 1 was the orientation of school board candidates. And then number 2, welcoming the new members of the board. And then 19, meeting guidelines for board and other district meetings. 21, handling concerns, complaints from the community. That's, obviously they need to know that right away. 22, handling concerns, complaints from staff. 23, spokesperson for the governance team. They need to know who can speak for the team. Because I don't know if everybody even on this board knows who speaks for the team. And, if we were to have an emergency pop up or a big action of some sort, a shooting or something, who on the board would be able to address the media? I don't know if everybody knows that or not.
Scott.
That is the right answer. That is the right answer.
And then, let's see, which one was that?
was 23.
That was 23.
Okay, 23.
Okay.
29, role of board members in public. Those are the things I think they need to know right off the bat before they ever step foot in the district publicly.
Well, it's true. There is not, the public is not required to give us a learning curve. When you go, as I said, you go to bed a candidate, you wake up, you're a board member. That
I was
board member,
shocked.
that hat is on. That board member
Yeah.
hat is on and doesn't come off.
It
You
was
know-
like one day I stood in front of the school district desk for 2 hours and nobody said anything to me. The next day it was, oh my God, I'll get him out of a meeting, you know? I was shocked at the difference.
Well, you know, everybody talks about how they get approached in the community at the grocery store
All the
or,
time.
okay, I've been on the board for almost 9 years and never once has anybody ever approached me. So if anybody out there is live streaming this, listening, I am approachable. If you see me, I'm 4'11". You can't miss me.
I couldn't go to
I'm
the
usually in
grocery store for a long
Grunchies with a
time.
baseball cap, but I'm still here. I'm still listening. Please, I would love to. I think it would be the best day as a board member if somebody actually approached me in public and said, "Hey, I know who you are.
It's
Here's what I have to say.
to
Say
Kelly
something to
and
me."
Steve
Yeah.
during their campaigns at the grocery store before
I-
I ever knew you.
Well, yeah, but then I stupidly called you Libby.
Yeah, she almost didn't live.
But I mean, you're the only one ever who's ever talked to me in any sort of public forum. Now, that's granted, I'm a pretty reclusive person, but still.
Well, Kelly, I'll tell you, but you see, you by issuing that great invitation to whatever, might be coming from this YouTube, but it's like Lee has done what so many folks have done, technologically savvy. What else can we do by having virtual office hours? We're seeing that happen a lot. And that really helps in two ways. Not only does it send a message, just like you were sending a message just now, but it also lets people have some structure. Like Steve said, sometimes structure helps communications. It brings structure. They know, oh, I want to be mindful of Dr. Lee's time, so I'm going to really think through and have my question ready to go, or have my concern ready to voice. So yeah, there's not just one way to be approachable. In line at Bel Air is one way, but there's certainly lots of other ways. And
I have to say, I wanted to set up some sort of Twitter conversations, and it kind of got shut down. So I'm really glad that Dr. Lee opened the door on this so that I can revisit that approach. And look at her,
We've been
she's
told-
shaking her
The
head.
attorneys have told us not to do it.
They said
Well,
straight
but
out.
the Zoom thing it's an office hour. That's different than it.
That,
I
yeah.
mean, that's what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Some way of getting community input
Yeah.
other than public comment at the board meetings.
Right.
I would love to have, topics of conversation and do that. And
But you as
obviously
an
I can't-
individual, but not as speaking as a board.
sure,
But we need to
cannot speak.
gather information. I'm not talking about giving information. I'm talking about
But individual.
hearing information.
it's all about, yes. In fact, that's
Intelligence.
really the kind of CSBA is obviously questions about social media interactions are big, but what it really boils down to is, and again, that's when you're talking about a Twitter account, a Facebook account, an IG account, sorry, that they should be viewed as a listen and learn tool, not a well, let me report on the district tool, a listen and learn tool. But and that's what online office hours, the same thing. And we see the heavens to Betsy. Maybe we'll back some of the in person. I remember I've had board members in my small rural district, because we're a big geographic area, that will maybe just say, okay, I'm going to be I'll be at Starbucks on Wednesdays after I drop my kid off at the high school. I'll be there from 8 to 9 or something like that. So listening and learning is not the same as saying, well, let me bring you up to date on what's going on in the district. But again, that's our responsibility. That's our responsibility as members of the collective body. So, all right.
So what is your opinion what is your opinion on answering Facebook posts?
Pretty much like public comment. Thanks for your input. I can see you're passionate about this. I'll leave it at that. So, Nancy, that was a lovely display of you having been on the school board side of the equation for over 20 years, having fresh in your mind some very specific ways that newly elected, newly joining board members can be helped to be onboarded to the process. That's quite impressive coming from you, who it's been a while since you were onboarded, and yet you remembered very specifically, wow, this is stuff I needed to know right away. So very nice, very nice. Okay, so that was April. Anybody with a May birthday? Anybody?
That would be me.
Okay, go Delray.
Well, they're pretty much the same as everybody else. Number 3, communication among governance team members. That's quite important. If we don't communicate with one another, we're ineffective. And that's very important as a team. Deliberation and decision-making at a board, a meeting.
What number is that?
I'm sorry,
13.
13. If we can do it in a positive manner at a board meeting, that shows effectiveness as well, and team working together. When mom and dad fight at a board meeting, trust me, it disrupts the whole community of our center community. It does not look kindly on the board. Individual board members request information, material, and action. I actually don't remember why. Oh,
I know why.
because, yes.
Because I tend to ask for a lot of information from the superintendent, and maybe I'm asking for it, Steve's asking for something slightly different, and Dr. Lee's asking for something else,
Yes.
and the poor staff is like running around in circles. So you're right.
We've got to be cognizant of our staff and their time. We cannot keep on asking to count how many spaces are at each school site, parking spaces at each school site. Example, didn't happen, but things like that.
But we had a policy that 3 of us had to agree before the superintendent put big hours into putting something together. And what happened to that?
I didn't know that policy ever existed, and I've been,
You know where that would be is in your bylaws. So separate from this meeting, you might want to research your bylaws, because your policies, that start like with the 9,000 digits and all that. But the bylaws might be something to visit to answer that question, Nancy, later, at a later time. Go ahead, Delray.
The main point on 50 is our staff is busy, our superintendent is busy. We just need to be cognizant of their time. Addressing conflicts among board members. Steve and Kelly addressed that. I don't have any more to say on that. I'm not gonna, what they said is just perfect. Let me see, 21 and 22, I also combined for the same reason as Kelly indicated. I believe that's very important on how to handle concerns and complaints. Board opinion versus individual opinion. Now, again, why I chose this as important is because more of the communication aspect of answering emails is the most important. We originally, if from my recall, Nancy, is that the board president would answer the email and speak for the board based on decisions and discussions that were had. Now, recently, and we have never had this topic of conversation since we have a new board, but people were answering emails individually, which is not bad, but then it gets to the point of, I can't find it right now, but having a consensus and making sure whoever answers that email has the same view or remembers how the vote was or how the discussion was and answers that question accordingly. Just not having their opinion, but have the opinion of the board as it was discussed. Does that make sense?
mm-hmm.
And same with email or messages from Facebook posts, that if you answer, make sure, if you're going to answer it has to be correct as opposed to what you think as an individual. If you're going to speak, you got to make sure it's the consensus of the board.
Well, and I would say that we don't even respond in a sense that it shows what our perspective is necessarily, but just maybe just list the facts. This is how the vote went, and thank you for your input.
No, I think what they were talking about though was like if you get a letter from a parent, the president says, "We received your letter. All board members have a copy of it. We are taking it under consideration. Thank you."
And leave it at that.
Yeah,
So
Yes, and the reason for that is not just clarity. It's not just so you don't have 4 different sort of versions or interpretations of it, but you are getting into the slightly murky water of a serial board meeting, a deliberation.
Exactly.
Right.
That is exactly it.
Well, and we no longer copy the rest of the board on those responses specifically for that reason.
Yeah, the dreaded
So
reply all.
It's 100%, it's 100% trust on the part of the rest of the board members that what I'm responding is appropriate. So, I mean, I always copy the superintendent, but
but you
You
need
know-
to, you and you alone need to copy us that you responded and what you said.
okay,
Yeah.
just let you guys know that I've responded.
Because
Right.
if somebody answers the
Okay.
question from whomever emailed or whatever the communication was, we need to know what was said, so we don't say something totally different.
Right,
And that just looks like we don't know what the heck we're doing.
right.
Yeah,
A lot
it's,
of times it's things that we have not yet voted on, so there is no
Well, it
unity
could
of
be
voice
like-
as of yet.
Right.
And that's also where the input, thank you, we received it, all the board members have received this, we appreciate your input.
Right,
yes,
But if it's something that's been voted on,
that's a whole
then
different
it's a
story.
factual, this is
Yes.
what happened, period.
And then at least copy the superintendent so he knows that what you said is accurate and it was how it was viewed.
it's a question of, as board members, we can't imagine getting a communication like an over the transom email or something and not acknowledging it. We just can't
Right.
imagine that,
Yeah,
can we?
no, you have
So,
to
so
acknowledge,
you
absolutely.
must acknowledge. I think our group, my district is really blessed that they have. We like you have fought very hard to keep our academics strong, but also to keep all kinds of programs that keep kids engaged, including arts. Arts is always one of them. And so back in the day, back in 2005, when I was first elected, they kept saying, "Oh, Monica, yeah, she's the music one. She's the arts candidate. She's the music one." And so then for a while, I would get, if there was ever any kind of a ripple that we were going to have to, have fewer band or choir classes or something like that, I would hear about it because, I was the arts board member, and but it was not appropriate for me to say when they'd say, "I can't believe it, they're cutting out, they're not going to as many band competitions this year because they say, we can't, the boosters don't have money for a bus or something." Then I could say, I share your passion for arts education in public schools. Thanks so much for bringing your observations to my attention, and I'll make sure that the superintendent and the staff are aware as well. Because we want to acknowledge, and they deserve to. Remember, we said lots of times what people need is to know they were heard.
Yeah.
That's all.
So
And
did
this-
did I explain what?
I think you did.
So
You went through,
just-
24 was the last one we had that you have
Just
others
really
after.
quick on that. Disagreeing a little bit here. I've been known, like on Facebook, we had a recent decision about setting start times for schools. And one of the Facebook groups I'm in, people were questioning why we did that. And they were upset about some of the start times. So clearly they hadn't watched the board meeting. And what my response to them is speaking only for myself.
You did say that.
Here's what I took into consideration before making the vote. We looked at bus schedules. We looked at trying to meet the law. We were concerned about this detail, that detail, just to let them know that the things that you're concerned about, we did discuss and consider.
Yeah.
And then I said that ultimately I voted for what I felt was the best thing at that moment.
Well, and see now, none of us would have gotten that communication. So I think it's perfectly appropriate for you to
Well,
respond to it.
no, I got
because-
it. I read it. I am on the same group, sorry, as Steve
Ah.
is.
Okay, so then between the two of you, you would have to make a determination.
Well, yeah, I always check to make sure she
Yeah,
hasn't
I do
commented
too.
before I do.
Right.
And
So there you go.
I
Right.
just stopped answering
And
posts
even
because
though
I
it's
know
only
you.
two of you, if there's any appearance of impropriety as far as Brown Act, then
Right.
can be bad, but since you guys are working together on it and not, you know.
Yeah, we're both being very careful because even if it's just the two of us, if we like something that the other posted or we respond to it, that could be a Brown Act violation. So we're both checking
Yep.
carefully.
Yeah, yeah. And that's same with Nextdoor, because I know you're on Nextdoor, I'm on Nextdoor, and I see what you write.
I have not been on hardly at all since Christmas.
I avoid Facebook like the plague, so.
And anyway, so,
But see, remember we talked, go back to that little short list of the characteristics of an effective trustee. Mindfulness. Steve's being
Sure.
very mindful. You're being mindful, Delroy. Mindfulness, confidentiality, deep learning and preparation, commitment and focus. So if you're being sounds like you're making mindfulness the rule of the day when you're doing that. And then, you know, Steve, if you're referring to action, you can refer back specifically. I think the minutes for the X date board meeting are posted on the website. You could take a
That's
look
a
at
good
it.
That's a good one.
That's a good point.
And you can watch the recording.
Yeah.
If you'd like.
Could he or we copy and paste from the minutes
Sure.
to?
I think so, sure. It's public
That might be-
document.
Or a link. That's a good
And a
idea.
link to
Yeah,
the
thank
meeting
you.
notes.
Yeah, and the link to the meeting notes. Thank you, Monica, that's
Yeah,
excellent.
and it also, and it gets them in the habit of trusting and going to the website.
Yeah.
To
Yeah,
start,
I-
starting there
Yeah,
for,
starting there.
I like that.
Yeah, that's.
okay. All right, cool. So what's
Talk it out.
what's
So
24?
and then with 24 was 25, speaking with a common voice. And that's what I was trying to get at. We need to be a common voice when we answer these questions or comments or whatever. We got to speak as a common voice. And then 27, same as Kelly and Steve, managing different topics, issues, the same response I have is what they said. So those were my 11.
Can I
Thank
add
you.
something to her,
You know,
to her common voice?
Sure. Go, Nancy.
Sometimes when we're asking for something, we're not conscious of the way we're asking for it. You can ask for it in a positive way or a negative way. And sometimes it looks really negative on the district, or sometimes it can be positive. And I think we need to pay close attention to how we ask for something and what the verbiage is that we use, because sometimes it really comes out negative sounding and putting district down when it's not what we're trying to accomplish at all.
I know from personal experience, my family has communicated to me many times that my tone of voice or the way I phrase something conveys an entirely different message than what I'm trying to say. To the point where, I've gotten in the habit of, if I'm calling a kid in my room to talk about something, I start off with, "Don't worry, it's nothing bad," because otherwise they were walking in like anxious that they were in trouble or something. And it's like, so I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that, I'm not going to be able to be there for this thing,
Yeah.
But they thought they were in trouble for some reason. So I know that I sometimes do that, where it comes across differently than I intended.
See, Steve, you are absolutely proving the point is that of the three components of communication: words, voice tonality, and body language including facial expression. Words is the least impactful, tone second, and body language the most. As I know, my husband, bless his heart, he has the same face, whether he is enjoying that first bite of a dish or whether he hates it. I can't tell because he has the same face. But it's just, I was told, I only met her once, but one of the long time, I guess she was president of CSBA. They seem to have had a lot of strong women presidents of CSBA over the decades. But her name was Maureen DeMarco, and she was attributed with openly saying that she would go to her bathroom mirror and practice what she called the benign board face. Now, not B-O-R-E-D, B-O-A-R-D. So that when you're in public comment or in deliberation on a thing, that your face is not saying something you don't want it to say. You have someone comes up at public comment and says, "We don't have enough buses. We should double the fleet. We should buy them all new. We should do it, and they should all have, Fortnite at every seat," or something like that. And if you, the board member, are trying to look a comment, nodding your way through it, what is the public seeing? oh, well, board member X wants us to go out and buy a bunch of new buses, so don't be shy about, like Steve, you said, you're prefacing your comments with, it's okay, you're not in trouble, everything's good. But that benign face that shows that you are being alert and attentive and engaged without communicating, yes, I'm all for that. Let me get the superintendent, get the checkbook. Let's go buy the buses, so practice that benign board face. Hopefully, as I say, it won't be the BORED face, but anyway. Okay, good. Go ahead, Nancy.
Jill, right.
Oh,
You had said
sorry.
something at the very beginning, you were looking at our body language. And we have to remember when we live stream, the audience is looking at our body language. And they're looking at anybody that's on Zoom, so that would be Lee as well. They're looking at all of us as a whole. So we have to be mindful of that.
And this has definitely been something that has been exponentially changed with COVID virtual meetings that
Yeah.
used to be.
Sure.
I remember at the board table, with the wooden skirt in front of the table, I wouldn't mind that, maybe my purse is open or my briefcase is spilled over like that because they can't see it. But everything else, what can be seen, you're right. It's
Yeah.
words matter, but so does body language and voice tonality. So very cool. Oh, we're making progress here. Okay, well, somebody, either Scott or Lee, is next. Who's got a June birthday? June, July, August, September, October, going once, November, December. Here's it. Lee got 2
I'm
Decembers. What's your-
November. No, I'm
Oh,
November.
oh, November. Okay, Lee, talk to us about this protocol list.
Okay, so I prioritized the 6, and I did do some combining, and I'll explain, my rationale. You've already heard some of it kind of in some parts of the meeting, but number 1, I put as number 19, meeting guidelines for board and other district meetings. Second, I put number 20, public comment section of the board meetings, and already some of my colleagues have already mentioned about that. Number 27, managing difficult topics, issues in an atmosphere of mutual respect. Number 13 was my 4th one, deliberation and decision-making at board meetings. And these are all connected. So that's why I'm just saying them all up front. Number 5 for me was 2 combined. Number 3, communication among governing team members. And number 17, addressing conflict among board members. And then my last one was number 25, which was speaking with a common voice, developing and using key messages. And so all of these were, as I was looking at this, I said, wow, this, if this is my protocol wish list, as we're here today in this workshop about effective governance, good beginnings, really doing transformative work. A lot of the things have stood out to me. This idea of the responsibility to be a truth speaker of your own truth, community truth, whatever the truth we're focusing on. Mindfulness around communication being really critical. I think that's something that as someone who's an analytical and driver-oriented person, protocol is key to me. And because I think it impacts perception. And something that was in the book that we were looking at was that the public perception of our board and confidence in our work is built on what they see in the conduct of our meetings. And so, that's why I'm really sensitive around that topic. Today, at the start of this meeting, some things took place, and I'll use this as an example of why I think protocol is so important, because it was brought to my attention by others observing. That is that at the beginning, we have an agenda. So my analytic driver side really looks at that agenda and expects an order to happen in the functioning of it. And that's just part of who I am and what I'm used to as being a governing board member in many different board settings. And so we skipped over our item number 1, which was call to order. We actually didn't skip it. We didn't actually skip it. Actually, the president did say it, but the roll call we skipped. And so we went directly into the flag salute, which is item 2. And then so Monica, our CSBA representative, recommended to us the call to order book. And she stated that she thought I spoke out of order because the president hadn't called the meeting to order. But that's not what took place in my perception and in the actual events. We launched into the Pledge of Allegiance. And so I made my community statement, which I always make during that item 2 free speech item. And so that calling out, it did make me feel a little uncomfortable. And it all happens, from maybe a misperception about the order of the agenda and how it should flow. And I think that it's important, so there's not a perception that a board member is speaking out of order in the future. That's important. It's important that we just maintain that order, that protocol. And so that's where my thinking was coming from. And I really do think we do set an example, we set a tone, the actions we take, reflect inclusiveness, diversity, and equity, or they don't. And so for me, it's something that I'm super passionate about. And just because I love what the doctor, I'm sorry, I've been taking all these notes. What the doctor mentioned, she said, dare to disagree. You won't commit energy and time to something if you don't care, right? I mean, so that's
A type
something
of
I think,
love.
yes, I think it's important that when we develop our protocols, we just keep that in mind. There's a reason we're all here. There's a reason we all keep coming back. And I love that we looked at our unity of purpose, because I think we'll start to see there's a lot more we have in common than different, especially when we're just keeping the focus on the students in the community.
Absolutely. Lee, I so value you shining a light on that, because there's, I receive that because of exactly what sometimes happens on these workshops, especially when they're on the weekend, especially when we're not, in the great halls wearing our business suits and such and all that. Sometimes informality takes too much of a role in the driver's seat, and I let that happen today, and I appreciate you shining a light on that, because that's exactly right. Because whether it's a 1-item agenda or a 50-item agenda, the agenda is not there just as a laundry list of things to talk about. It has a structure and a purpose. And just like Steve, when you were saying that, sometimes that's where protocols can help us, because the structures make us more effective. So Lee, I value that, and I receive that exactly in the spirit in which I know that it was offered. I appreciate that. But isn't it true?
Monica, can I just say that this is something that I'm really glad came up, because we have never as a board taken roll call. In the 10 years that I've been on the board, we have never done a roll call. It says it right on the agenda. Carol does it. She takes roll call, but she doesn't, it's not an auditory thing. But yes, I think that since it's on the agenda, we should be doing it. So I set that as far as one of my, as the president, one of my things I need to focus on. So yeah. I'm really glad you pointed that out, but I did call it to order at 9:03.
So quick question here. Something like discussing changing it so that we do the roll call verbally, is that something that we should be adding to a future meeting agenda to discuss changes in how we do things?
I don't think so, because it's on the agenda. It's on the agenda. Right. So, I mean.
And it's in the
it's in your bylaws, most likely.
It's in the bylaws for how we outline it. So I would
just
say
been an oversight.
If we want to remove it, we would certainly want to have a discussion and talk about it.
Because, there's some changes that I have in mind that I think we could do things a little bit better.
Sure.
And I wasn't sure if it'd be better to put that as an agenda item in the future, or when we should address that.
Since we're talking about it, I think that we need to have a workshop and develop a governance handbook if we don't already have one, or update the governance handbook as one of them, develop our own norms. I think that's where all of this conversation is leading. And I think that's where that conversation would happen.
We should discuss the whole agenda.
The agenda structure. I mean, all of those things would be.
Right, and I think, Monica, you're going to get to that point after this, and I think that's the next phase or evolution of this would be to develop that handbook that would have your norms, starting with some of these prioritized protocols, the calendar, board calendar. And then I agree, this outline or the structure, that has been in place for quite some time. So we might as well revisit, and then now can be part of that governance handbook. So then we're on that same page. I mean, I've seen this thing 100 times, and I see roll call, but you know what? I really appreciate you calling that out, Lee. You can see how new people, which I'll wait for my turn, because I did have something I want to talk about. Sorry, that's one of my protocols I want to talk about.
Yeah, you said you've been on many boards, and so I respect the fact that you've got that perspective, and I've been to lots of meetings, but this particular meeting, we've never done roll calls, so.
You know, I'll tell you what's interesting about that is that this is where it comes in the other P word, which is practices. A lot of districts, they may have their protocols, but it becomes their practice to
Yeah.
omit something or do it
We have a
differently.
lot of those.
My
You know,
district,
It makes
yeah.
more difference now that we're online too.
yes, and well, I'm gonna make a specific point about it, but for practice, for example, in my district, we had an expected protocol on public comment, and it was the 3-minute limit of time, and we never enforced it. So it
Yeah,
was
no, we
there,
don't
but we
enforce
never
that.
enforced it, you know.
It
And
says
so
it-
the idea that you have you've never done an audio or a verbal call and response call, a roll call, that's a practice, but it may not be your actual bylaw protocol. However, Scott would be the one who could research this. But you know, last year when the governor gave us all a waiver so that public bodies could meet virtually, I'm not sure, but there might have been some specific direction about calling the roll rather, because like if we were in a group and we could do a voice vote, but many districts I know stopped doing voice votes at virtual meetings altogether and did roll call votes. But
We always do a roll call.
Yeah, so we do,
Yeah, okay.
when someone's phoning in or zooming in, we
So you don't do the voice vote, okay.
No
We do a
general
roll call.
consent.
I try.
They try to.
I still try every once in a while, like to adjourn. It's like, okay, are we general
Make it
consensus?
consistent.
Nope, gotta have a roll call
Make
vote.
it consistent.
Yes. Practices and protocols hopefully join hands more often than not. But, well, last but not least, I think December birthday.
Yeah,
Superintendent
and I
Laird.
was, if you're going late, I'm December 29th, so I was way at the end. I knew I was gonna be last. So the only one that somewhere unique was the welcoming new board members to the board. I always felt like that's a protocol that but I think I need to bring on like the board president to that
Yes.
meeting would be great too. And that's just the practice that I carried on because I knew. So when Steve Kelly
That
came
would
back,
be
Lee
good.
came on, I did it on my own. Gave you the materials, we kind of talked, but I think someone else, because what if I forget something in that or, you know, the materials, or it's maybe a board question. So that to me was one word.
I mean, I honestly didn't know we had an onboarding process,
It's
so
meeting with me and
yeah,
going through the
I think
handbook.
that that's something one of those conversations that we
Just-
need to have.
Just
So-
getting them in with another board member, I think it's a great idea.
And
Terrific,
COVID
terrific chapter. While we're on that, just I know I'm saying, but that governance core book has a terrific chapter on onboarding. It's a nice chapter.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
sorry,
it was-
Scott.
The uniqueness too of having 3 new members come on in the middle of the pandemic was also challenging because it provided harder times to meet. And so, and then 13, deliberation, decision-making at board meetings. I just think the protocol for that, and I think you guys, most all of you have stated, but just working as a team together with that ultimately common voice. Meeting guidelines for board and other district meetings.
What number is
I'm sorry, number 19. I think that's good. And then when I see this as a rippling effect as our district meetings being conducted, when those district employees see the way the board is following a structure, it helps ripple down the fact that they'll do the same or similar. Public comments at board meetings, I think we have been all over the board. And I think that the 3-minute rule is one. We have that on our agenda, but I can't think of a time we've ever followed it. And to me, if you can't switch practice once you do it, so there's no way we can really enforce 3 minutes when we've let people talk forever anyway. So I think some of these you got to kind of start fresh, and then that's our consistent policy, because you can't waver and go, oh, I'll give Lee 17 minutes, but Steve, you get 2 minutes. I mean, you have to be consistent. Otherwise, we're going to get called on that.
Right,
I think the only time we did, board members got recalled.
well, and the fact that it's on the agenda means that Lee, knowing she only has 3 minutes, has prepared a 3-minute
Right.
statement. And Steve, knowing that we never enforce it, has prepared a 15-minute or didn't prepare at all and just rants for 15 minutes. That's not fair to Lee. And so if it's going to be on the agenda, then it needs to be enforced, and we have never done it. So
Along those lines, we recently had a parent who was expressing some concerns, and he was the only public comment we had, and we did a lot of back and forth, and it was very friendly, and we got some good ideas, and I think it was actually productive. However, We shouldn't have done that
Right.
because we denied others the opportunity to join in the conversation.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
we need to be better
Listen
about that.
and then
You're,
say thank you.
Yes.
And then
Okay.
I won't be late. 21, 22, I marked for the same reasons you all did. And then the 24, I marked as, and I put it in the we and the I, just clarifying what those roles are. And I think we talked about that one. Difficult topics, and then atmosphere of mutual respect. And I wrote next to that norms. I think our goal.
Wait.
Number 27.
Slow
27.
down, Seven. So wait a minute. What was your last one? 24. And then the next is 27?
And I think
I'm keeping score here.
for that, it's really about the norms. And I think agreeing to those collective agreements that how we treat each other is perfect, but we don't have those right now. I mean, and then the
But it's
last
common
one,
sense, but yeah.
self-monitoring and governance team effectiveness. I like that one. I think it's a good opportunity for us as a governance team quarterly or whatever, just to sit down, check in, make sure things are going. So I like the idea of that checking.
Yeah, and CSBA has a really great survey already in place that we could do. Actually, we do it online, they analyze it and send us back the results. Is that how it works?
Yes,
Monica? Yeah.
Yes.
So I am
That was listening.
advocating. The CSBA has a survey for self-assessment for governance teams.
board
So-
member self-assessment. Yeah.
Yeah, so we submit it and then they compile
Right.
the information and shoot it back to us. So I think that's something we should advocate for, or we should work towards.
You guys, this is exciting because you're doing what we said we were going to try to do today, which is, just clean around, look around, move things out, shine light on areas so we can understand if we flex these muscles in this way, it's going to get us well positioned, better positioned for better deliberations and better actions resulting. So as this, my notes, probably yours do too, it looks a little like a giant, Mega Millions card. When I go through it, I never get any of the numbers, but I'm always like, oh, look, I got one there, one there, one there. But we have really gleaned some stuff in the commonality that happens, because this is what an HPB, high performance board is. You've got that unity of purpose thing really rolling along here. You're starting to really communicate. You've shared the importance of the common voice. You shared the importance of trust and dignity and respect and collectively communicating and taking responsibility collectively. All of those are from, I think it's the Lighthouse study, a really quite impressive study in the field, which is cited a lot. I certainly quoted a lot, but these are the characteristics of HPB, high performing boards. And that's where this process, which is not over today, but which is really just sort of beginning for you in this new configuration of board. That's where this prioritization of the protocols happens. So now what if you wanted to develop a protocol? So back to your workbook and go back a couple of pages to page, 2 pages up, let's see, page 49, because you figured out why protocols are important. They've helped you build a team. Yes, that showed up in several of your choices. They empower the team in good times or bad. Sometimes you really need to rely on that collective voice. They, as Nancy just really helped us get the discussion going, they really help you onboard new members. And doesn't the public deserve that? Don't they deserve a board member that can, of course, it's lifelong learners. You betcha learning about the district, about the issues, about trends, about needs, about data. Yes, but you want to get up to speed or something resembling it as soon as possible. So protocols really help you onboard new members, and all of that together, gets us back to this question of how are we enhancing student achievement? And so it's not just to make you win a prize in the Robert's Rules of Order competition for best parliamentary procedures. Who's the other one? There's two of them. There's Roberts, and then there's another one that's quite popular this time. But it really, really, really does help you support student achievement. And I'll stop singing that song. You know that. Okay, let's look at the page about the process for developing a protocol. First one, deciding what you want to develop. Look what you just did. There was such a clear emergence of shared common protocol areas. The example they give is staff board communications, the process for board member site visits, how you bring up new ideas, et cetera. I won't read the rest of you, but step one, that's what we just did. You did, and does it mean that's it, written in ink, written in stone? No, you may go back, you maybe tonight go back and look at this 30 protocol list and say, oh, I can't believe I forgot that one. That one's very key. Shoot it over to Scott and Carol so it can get incorporated into this. But you've done step one, which is make these determinations about what you want to develop, which protocols to do. And then the second one is a little more difficult because you've done it as discussing and prioritizing. And I have a little bit of a contrarian point of view about prioritizing, because generally in our work, just like LCAP wants us to do, we're supposed to be prioritizing because, they say you can't. I have one colleague who always says, you should never tell a constituent or a parent or something that you can't afford to do this or that program, because you can do anything you want to. You can spend the money on anything you want to. You just won't have it for something else. There's a different, but I feel like to the extent your higher power brain can get you there, prioritizing is the goal, but sometimes we think they're all priorities. You saw that in sometimes you group together 21 and 22. They become sort of joined and merged. When you are talking about managing resource flows and budgetary concerns and talking about community input for your LCAP preparation, of course, the priorities must be vertically rank ordered. But in terms of protocol, I really see it more as whatever sort of graphic, sort of a wheel, a cycle, a circle, where sometimes we have to just suck it up and say they're all priorities. So step two, I leave that to you to ponder, to agree or disagree with me there, but that prioritizing the protocols is important, but sometimes we have to just accept that they're all pretty darn important. Third one, clarifying the issue. This is where the parts of the protocol development process kind of come in. So if we say priority is one, identifying the protocol need and prioritizing it, then the next thing is, what's the rationale for it? I'm going to read this to you because you see it's important to agree on the problem protocols intended to solve, or as we said, sometimes how we couch things in our verbiage and how we express things or articulate them in a more positive manner, agree on what the protocol is intended to do, and here comes the rationale part, why it's important. And you often helpful to define the parameters of protocol, rules and regs that must be followed. Sometimes protocols involve execution by staff or something like that. So if your protocol is to, like Del Rey said, be respectful and mindful of the superintendent and his team's bandwidth, whatever language you want, which Del Rey kept saying, be mindful of their time and such. That sounds, kind of nice, warm and fuzzy, but you might need to put some timelines or specificity to it. You might need to say, part of the rationale for this is that special reports to the board to be presented at the board, to be prepared in the board packet, however you want to describe it, need to be requested from the superintendent 5 business days before or something like that. So give thought when you do the rationale, the rationale why it's important, but then sometimes you need to clarify and put some guiding principles to it. The fourth one, identify the situation, if necessary, from different perspectives. If the topic's straightforward, minimum controversy, that step is important. But I prefer that because you've committed the time to do all this, moving I to we, becoming a collective body, that this is a lens always good to look through. Though I enjoy the interchange, Del Rey and Steve, as you were talking about sort of the way you, with the intentionality that you brought to just reading Facebook posts of a group that you're in, that you aren't quick trigger McGraw and just jumping in there and hitting that reply right away. You're looking and saying, well, I want to be really mindful, because what might other information sources have gotten through to this communication. So appreciate that. So it's not for the purpose of stifling or stymieing a colleague. It's really more for the idea of understanding that, as we said in that beginning quote, when you gather more interpretations, it literally strengthens the outcome, strengthens the work that you're doing. So that's step 4. Number 5, write the protocol. Just like most tasks of when you're doing individual district policies, as opposed to those that come down the pike automatically that are, mandated by changes in law that you get from CSBA. But to the superintendent generally falls this task of writing the protocol. But that means somebody's just got to start the process by putting pen to paper initially. But that is just the beginning of the process, because then each of you in this 6-headed creature will be able to weigh in on the protocol. That is how I think some districts, when they're doing their superintendent evaluation document, rather than go back and forth, maybe one person will draft and the other board members will respond. It's a similar workable process. It keeps you out of getting into a serial meeting or email meetings and that sort of thing. So typically the writing of the protocol starts with the superintendent. Maybe the follow-up step is if you have a subcommittee of 2 board members that are charged with then reviewing with the superintendent, bringing it, and then the other members of the governance team would weigh in before you actually adopt it. Because remember, you adopt agreed on protocols, not like, well, I like this one, I like that one. Your protocols are going to be broadly adopted by the collective body. All right, step 6, agree on and amazingly record the protocol. It just becomes a lot more real when you say, wow, I am committing to not calling Scott on the afternoon of the board meeting and saying, oh, I forgot to ask you, but I wanted that discipline report from the Can you pull that together for me? And then you remember, you know what? That is not in sync and respectful of the protocol, which I agreed to. So it makes us, it makes you understand the importance of the common agreement of the protocol before you adopt it. But when you record it, it's there. It's there until you change it, of course.
Can I just take a segue from that specific
Sure.
example? How would you see us? I mean, I know this is something we're going to discuss when we develop the protocols, but how would you see us handling that situation? If we email the rest of the board and say, hey, I'd like to request this information, are we in any sort of gray area on violating Brown Act? If I'm just saying, I'd like to request this information, are you guys okay with that? Or
You
is
do it
that?
at the board meeting and say, do I want it?
No. That would not work, doing it at the board meeting. There's no way, because I'm looking at the agenda the week before, or I'm looking at
No,
whatever.
something not on the agenda, like I want to know what the bus schedule is for all of the district. If it's something you're bringing up out of clear blue sky, at the meeting, you would say, I would like Scott to bring up this report for me and tell me how many kids are getting on the bus at each stop.
And then
Is
what
any
would
other
we-
board member willing to request that or want that information to act on?
I think I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, I think that there are times throughout the month, not necessarily at a board meeting, where you need information or you like to get information so that you have the time to really delve into whatever it is you're working on. And I don't think waiting for a board meeting is
I
necessary.
think emailing all of the board members, that gets into risky area. Perhaps a better approach is simply say, hey, is this a reasonable request? Can you guys accommodate this? And you need to be willing to say,
Yes
that's
or
too
no.
much.
Right.
And
He would
typically.
never do that. He's too nice.
Well, yeah, but what we've done too is a lot of times it's me and board president, the request might go through. And now if it's the board president, she wouldn't be requesting herself, but that's been done too. Now the night before or the day of is probably not going to be a request that anyone here is going to ask for anyway, but an extensive report. But I think maybe that's the check and balance too, that we can end up getting into protocol is, because you couldn't email the whole board that, because I think Steve.
I mean, even if you're just saying, I want to request this information,
Yeah.
does anyone else want this information? You're not saying what your opinion is. You're
Well,
not
can we
saying
just
why you
email it,
want it.
respond to you, and then based on the responses, you make the decision, okay, the board
Yeah.
said no.
Well, it kind of depends on what you're requesting too, how much is
Yeah, for instance,
time is it gonna take?
I asked for, which I knew already existed, I asked for the listing of all of our HVAC units and their lifespans and where we were in the cycles of replacing them. It was a lot of information. It sounds like a huge request. I know Craig, I know he's got it, so I requested it. What I neglected to do was say, it's not an immediate request. And so I've gotten better about saying, hey, sometime in the future, I'd like to see this information. But I just feel like if we're really, I'm sorry, Monica. we're going
No,
off
Kelly,
on a
no,
tangent.
no, this is
I
a,
think we're really
workshop.
limiting the board members in their ability to gather information by saying we could only request. information
This is
of
the
board
kernel, this is the kernel of what we're talking about, the board member preparation and deep learning pre-board meetings. So let's come back to that as our topic. But I think your discussion, I'm hearing two components. One is perhaps the type or amount of information that might be requested, and the other is the timing of the request for the information. So if you're going to, you want to have at least one other board member join you in saying, yes, that would be valuable information, that has to do with the type of information you're requesting, a report on HVACs or vans or whatever. The issue of timing is a separate one, and that could be the protocol about timing and requesting staff information is a function of, like Del Rey's point about being mindful or aware of the bandwidth that staff has. So, but how this all comes together under the big umbrella, Kelly, I think is the idea of each individual board member. Sometimes they're quite similar, but different people have different at times of their career, their board member career, may have different information gathering processes they do with the superintendent. When I first joined, this is the old days, but after I got my board packet, I had lunch, sit down one-on-one lunch with my superintendent. I was new. We would brown bag it and go through the whole thing. Sometimes the CBO would join us at parts of it. That's not a process that I feel I need to continue at this point, because my experience has enabled me to get my information out of the way. But each individual board member, Scott probably is amenable. I believe this, you proved this, and when I ask you about your board communications, is that you are ultimately adaptable to how some people want the text, some people want the phone call, some people want an email, some people want this or that. So Kelly, I feel like it's sort of the issue of having another board member say, yes, I would like that info too, is separate and apart from the issue of not asking for a report too late.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? Yeah.
Oftentimes mine come after a training or, a week before the board meeting.
Yeah.
Where I need more information. So, and like when I first came back on the board, I felt like, okay, I need to get caught up on some information. So I was asking for quite a few things. And that's our job.
Yeah, but you gotta remember, you have 4 others that are asking him to do the same thing, and Miss Carol,
Yeah.
Well,
at that
and
one
that-
time,
and at that
she was
point, Miss
working her-
Carol needs to speak up and
Carol's the
say,
And that's where-
hey,
Six of us,
Scott, we
you know?
have 6 requests. These are real
Yeah.
similar. Which ones are most important? Can we get back to the board members and say, we'll get you this today? This should answer all 3 of you guys' questions. This other request, we're gonna wait until next week.
Right.
And that's you guys' triage process.
Right.
Just because I ask for something doesn't mean I need it now, right this second. And if I do need it now, right this second, I will specify that.
Well said.
And the other piece would be, there really isn't, when we get big things, you all get them. Like if you
Right.
ask for the HVAC, I send that to everyone.
You said it does.
And now if you call me one day and say, hey, I see this vendor, what does this vendor do? Well, I'm probably not going to share that this music, whatever. There's different
depends
types
what it is.
of requests, but if it's a huge programmatic, shift or something like that, then that probably would come through a board meeting. But if it's, I want some gathered information, it's hard to label it.
You know the history behind this and why it was done that way. And if Steve hits you with wanting information for the band department and Dell hits you with wanting information for Spinelli and Kelly wants information for the junior high school and Carol's running the 50-mile raceway, you sync. And that's the whole reason why we put that in the beginning, is just to be able to say, Kelly, you're not allowed to ask Scott 5 times a week for a different report. And that's what it was being abused, is what was happening.
But it hasn't been. And that's
It hasn't been by anybody here, no. But at the time, it was being abused. And that's why we had to have something put in to say, to protect them.
It's not,
because
but we don't
they were
want
running
it.
But again, I
crazy.
really feel like that is the responsibility of the superintendent and to triage that.
And we can come back with
process.
timelines. And there's no one on here that I wouldn't come back and say, hey, Steve, working on X, Y, and Z. I'll have it for you next Friday or Tuesday or whatever.
Can
And
we
if-
look at this in June?
Yeah.
Can,
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I don't see, at least not at this moment, I don't see it, but I think
Right.
under general understanding that there may be times where if I'm
It
hit
has to
with
be
6
that.
things,
No.
I need to be able to come back to you guys and say, no, we need to do this order.
Well, Scott, this is what I'm saying, because there is agreement that you play a special role in this governance team in being the single employee of this your employer, that they not only expect from you, but they respect that you will do the triage and that you will do that. So that's where there are 2 other things I want to mention about protocol development before we talk about what does this mean for center in terms of governance handbook and protocol development as the foundational architecture of governance handbook, is that typically your protocols would be adopted by way of coming to consensus, not by way of motion second roll call vote, typically, because if they come together in the prioritized way, and you guys saw the commonality of purpose, how often the same numbers percolated to the top of your list here. You have a very clear shared vision of what your protocols should be. So usually they would be adopted by consensus rather than by, individual, roll call vote. So that I would mention has been the typical way. And the other thing is they should be, and if you have a mechanism to make this happen, whether it becomes part of your, policy review to every 12 months or something like that, or it's just a separate thing you put on your governance calendar, that you monitor the protocols to see if they need to be modified, tweaked, eliminated, strengthened. Just like policy, that's the same thing we tell you about policy development, that you evaluating it after it's out there is the only way you know that it's, first of all, doing what you expect it to do, and it's not having unintended consequences. So your protocols deserve the same monitoring and evaluation after the fact. So we always like to recommend that as you develop your protocols, you build into that a mechanism for monitoring them and seeing if they're doing what you wanted them to do.
Yeah.
So before we get toward the actual end of our time, boy, the day has flown by. I want you to look again at a way that I hear the unsaid question, and a lot of times it's said, it's like, we have so much in our agenda. We obviously took this topic, the governance approach, and made it a separate meeting as a workshop meeting. But there is this type of meeting which a lot of boards do not avail them of, called the conversation discussion meeting. And it's on that workbook starting on page 52. Yeah. So just take a second. I'll go quiet and look at the types of conversation discussion meetings you might have.
So these would be special meetings?
A conversation meeting is an opportunity different from a study session. For example, your you might call an agendized, posted public meeting that was a study session where the superintendent, the CBO might go through
Budget
a budget
workshop.
issue, a budget workshop. But this is for other issues and needs where you really need this forum where you can have conversations and not just motion, second vote, you know, or I should say report, motion, second vote. So these are the types of meetings you might have. They yield incredible bits of enlightenment. I mean, I've obviously learned lots about you guys as individuals in our conversations today and such. I rather imagine you've learned something about your colleagues and fellow trustees as well today. And the normal, if there is such a thing, the normal board meeting often is not the best environment for these conversational interactions to take place. And one of the areas where a conversation discussion meeting is about halfway down, it says develop a governance handbook. So I know you're all looking for more Saturdays to give up, but I think you will. I'm recommending, I'll put this in my follow-up communication, that you're ready after doing this hard work about identifying protocol areas to have the second conversation about writing the protocols and adopting them and making them part. And typically it's when that document is done and it doesn't need to be a 200-page tome, you know, or something. Sometimes it can be done in just a few pages, and then it becomes something just like the superintendent evaluation where you all sign it. Adopted June 14th, Center JUSD Board of Trustees, and you all sign it. Now that's pretty quick. I'm not saying you're going to get it done June, but that's my thought. But I call this to your attention because this is one of the best ways for a governance handbook to come into being by not having to reinvent the wheel, but starting with the architectural foundation of the protocol priorities that you already said. So look down, just to repeat the subhead about rationale. It says governance team members recognize the difficulty in finding the balance between one's own beliefs and values, interests of constituents, the needs of all children, the pressures of wanting to work effectively together as a team. We call that at CSBA the balancing act. Remember back before you were we, you were I, and you had that luxury. I've shared this in many of my conversations with you guys, I think, that before you joined the board, you had the luxury of advocating for an issue, a school, a teacher, a program, a topic. You had that luxury. And then you became part of the board. Delray, I think you articulate very well at the beginning of our day. It's different. It's different when you get at the table. And so this is part of the rationale for a conversation discussion meeting, because you want to have that positive environment. You want to have norms that make positive environment a must, but you can usually do that best in the type of a conversation meeting. And it doesn't have to be a 6-hour marathon as we've pulled today, but I do suggest that becomes something that you begin to look at on your calendar going into the summer months of how you could take the protocols and make the foundation of a governance handbook. Then at the bottom of page 53, you'll see right there, it brings us back to the beginning of our discussion when we started out, good grief, almost 6 full hours ago. We said we were going to talk about unity of purpose. We were going to talk about roles and responsibilities, and most specifically, the difference between the role of the trustee vis-a-vis the role of the board, and further specifically, the role of the board vis-a-vis the role of the superintendent and his or her team. Then we talked about the importance of the positive culture. We had a TED talk that gave us a little courage, I hope, about understanding that daring to disagree is a worthy goal, because how did Heffernan call it? She said that conflict sometimes is a way of doing your best thinking. We talked about norms, how we treat each other. You have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. You got kids at your, 14 schools? They expect you to keep the doors open, keep the lights on, keep you out of legal trouble where you're not spending lots of money, paying lawyers to get you out of hot water. Those students, each and every, not just all, are depending on you to manage the resources that allow you to put conditions in effect that are going to serve them best, whatever their needs are, meeting them where they are. That's exactly what. So I don't want you to have to give up too many Saturdays or having extra meetings. You don't want extra meetings, but that is my strong suggestion, is that you consider a conversation meeting where you can move ahead with your governance handbook. So that's where I find us today. I want to thank you all for doing this. It's been really interesting for myself and others on the consulting team to have these conversations virtually. I would ask you each to put out some good vibes to CSBA, my employer, so that they will stop teasing and taunting, because I keep saying, when do we get to go back to districts? When do we get to go back? And they have hinted that they might be allowing 25% of the regular staff go back into the office up there in the Sacramento area in mid-June. And they've hinted that those of us who travel the state might be able to meet in districts maybe in the fall. So our paths may cross again. I certainly, Scott, will have follow-up, a memorandum, which I'll send to your attention to share with the board. I will repeat I have no financial advantage with the books that I recommended to you. I just know they're awfully good. Call to Order and Governance Core. There's one more that I like to throw in, which is by Covey, not Stephen Covey, the famous one, but by his son, actually. He's Stephen M.R. Covey, called The Speed of Trust. The importance about trust and how it can color our conversations. And the one that I'll leave you with from Speed of Trust is this. He says, the principle is simply this: we tend to get what we expect, both from ourselves and from others. When we expect more, we tend to get more. When we expect less, we tend to get less. So my friends, my colleagues, expect more, get more, give more. Thank you for your time. If there's anything else I can do, you all have my email, probably even my cell phone number. Scott, the next step is for me to get you the follow-up memorandum, and I will be following your progress with bated breath.
Will we get you next time? Is it a set thing or is it up for grabs?
Quite possibly. If you didn't, it would only be a scheduling issue. So the point is, if we work schedules out in advance, it would not be an issue.
So we could request you.
Yeah.
Certainly could. Certainly could.
Great.
I think that consistency
Job well
would be
done,
good.
Monica.
Yeah,
Thank you.
very, very appreciated.
Thank you all so very much. I hope that you endure the rest of doesn't sound like it's been much of a holiday weekend for some. On Monday,
This is great.
hydrate, take lots of water, and I will look forward to our paths crossing again. And Carol
Thank you,
again,
Monica.
Thanks,
Jean
Monica.
Jean and Carol, big thanks to you for making it happen.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Jean.
thank you.
Yes, indeed. Bye.